I wouldn't mind starting the discussion, but anyone else is free to join, obviously. But I think the best way to accelerate and grow the seaweed industry is actually to see the potential synergies between the end applications. Growing seaweed for the sake of growing seaweeds has some benefits, but they're limited. Obviously, you have the whole carbon sequestration part, and then sinking the CO2. But I think where we can actually get some value is by having those end products. I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything stupid by saying that a business requires producing something and then selling it. So if you produce the seaweed, you have to do something with it. But right now, I think a lot of the issues we're seeing is some of those end applications require extraction of such material from the seaweed. You don't use the seaweed in its original crop form. So I think that there needs to be more synergies between the end products. Let's say you have a consortium of a couple of companies. One requires proteins inside the seaweed. The other one will use the seaweed to do bioplastics, so using the polysaccharides. You can use the waste to do animal feed, etc., etc. By buying the seaweed crop, or even putting the our forces together to cultivate or to produce that seaweed together, then it's probable that the raw material price will also decrease, and that's the main argument to have the industry evolve. Eventually, you can be as blue or green or sustainable as you want. If your product is not appealing to the public, if you're not price worthy, then there won't be any change. So I believe that's one of the major things to do: collaborate to reduce the prices. And the other thing, obviously, is upstream in the research side. How do you cultivate more efficiently? How do you select the crops that are more resistant to the temperature variations? I'm mainly talking about red seaweeds here because due to global warming, we're seeing some the emergence of some diseases in the crops. But same for other types of seaweeds. Obviously, modifying the seedlings, improving the yields, etc., in the extraction and in the cultivation. Probably super, super crucial. But if anyone has anything to add, I'm more than willing to hear it out.
Of what I've seen in the field so far is that we need to absolutely, and this is something that I think Ocean Health from Van Oord is doing, which I think is fantastic, which is why I jumped on this call, is to definitely increase awareness in regards to how it's affecting the planet, and how so many negative contributions are happening due to consumerism and the market, and how we're going towards buying certain products. So increasing awareness is going to decrease the consumption of maybe plastic. But the biggest thing I've noticed so far, that I've been fighting this with for like the past 5 years, just working with the Ocean Cleanup and working with in San Diego, coming to the Netherlands, working in the investment fund world as well, is just we need to increase the scale of the seaweed industry, period. Like we just our competition is virgin plastics of fossil fuels, which is just cheaper. That's it. That's like the basics, and I'm sure you guys understand that already, but I think that's the biggest thing. So changing the awareness, bringing attention to the awareness, changing the market, how people are buying, is really, I think, the biggest thing. And I think Ocean Health by Van Oord this is a great way of going about it. And I really like the last presentation that I saw by Morris, I believe that was his name.
Yeah, Maris Tuitmans, exactly.
Fantastic. He's really making a good point, and this is very exciting to see. And I think but the biggest thing is just we gotta increase the awareness, which increases the impacts to state like investment funds, and then that ultimately changes the direction of how we go about doing this. But just increasing scale of the seaweed industry all across the boards, the green, the red seaweeds, all of them would really help to accelerate and grow that seaweed industry, period. So I think you guys are doing a great job so far, so thanks.
I agree. Though I won't be the devil's advocate, like a little bit, but scaling up the seaweed industry requires to have a purpose for it. And as I said, you can have the best heart, the best mind that you want to put in there. Eventually, especially from a startup point of view, when you go to reach to an investor and they're asking you, what is your product? Is it cheaper? Yes, no. Yeah, it has to be cheaper. That's the thing. You properly mentioned it with the fossil fuel plastics. but right now, the truth is most of the seaweed farms, they produce to certain prices. You can see alginates are around $15 per kilogram. In the market, carrageenans have increased by a twofold within the last 2 years. The agars are following the same trend, around $20 per kilogram. If you want to make a bioplastic based on those materials, you're going to end up with a bioplastic that's at least between 5 and 10 USD per kilogram. If you go to see anyone who uses plastic on a large scale, I mean, tons, megatons, kilotons and then megatons, no one will take your product. This is why we're seeing a lot of use of the seaweeds in more valuable and higher margin economies. I mean, you think about the healthcare, the cosmetics, which is why the bioplastic sector is kind of having a trouble developing there. Some people have opted for the available resource route. So I'm mainly talking about the sargassum or the ulva, although ulva films have a very poor properties in the mechanically and chemically. But for sargassum, a lot of people are thinking this is exactly what C Corp is doing. Not C Corp, C Combinator. But I think their model is actually quite good. Making just bioplastics or just one product won't work. Then it's a huge risk. Obviously, if you want to do everything, if you want to do the plastic, if you want to do the healthcare, if you want to do the cosmetics, if you want to do the animal feed, the biogas production, that's great. I'm really looking forward to how they will put this all of this together. But again, the economic incentive has to be there, and that's not the only thing. You were mentioning seaweed plastics are just more expensive than petroleum plastics. I don't think that's the only issue, sadly. The issue is also the properties. Polyethylene, polypropylene, polyethylene terephthalates, and all other petroleum derivatives, they're great because their properties are absolutely insane. We trash talk a lot about plastic, and I agree with most of that, but let's also remember that it's a fantastic material, and just saying it's a material is also a huge problem.
It's a fantastic material when it comes down to durability, but when it comes down to single plastic products, single-use plastic products, that's where we can make the change. Because plastic is a fantastic material. I love plastic. I researched it for 2 years in my master's degree. I completely understand. I'm not a hater on plastic materials. I'm a hater on single-use plastic, and that's where seaweed can come in and replace that. But we need to put more money, more awareness, more material funding in mass scaling these type of industries, and that's where we can make really good changes, because in the end, that's what's really affecting the oceans is single-use plastic. There's other things, but those are big aspect amongst all the other pollution that's happening. But that is something that we can do as consumers to really help, and that's single-use plastic, and that's something where I think seaweed can kick butt, and that's where I would like to push.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we're touching the actual problem here. It's not, can we replace plastic with seaweeds? No, I don't think that's the right way to approach it. The right way is which market is actually relevant to tackle with it, and that's where the whole business minds that I'm trying to become while founding the company. It's my co-founder who has the business background. I have a background in materials engineering, but obviously you have to know where you will penetrate the market so that you actually make a difference. If we were to replace performance plastics in engineering, automotive industry, there is absolutely no way it would make any impact, which is why obviously we're targeting fast consumption goods, takeaway foods, etc., etc.
Yeah, in the end, I think it's very important to, no matter what, I'm very passionate about this. So I think it's very important to come across as we're not trying to eliminate all plastic. We're not trying to hinder all markets of plastic. That's something I understand, but we have to hit where there is actual data to support it. And that's what we have data on, because data is what's going to make change. Data is what's going to bring awareness. And that's how we can, I think, really just start hitting people in like the gut of how they make their purchases when they're, in the years coming with more technology helping. But yeah, again, scaling for single-use plastic substitutes material is very important, I think, and where we can hit.
If no one minds, I have a question that I've been asking around since pretty much the start of the venture. When people ask us, how do you plan on decreasing the price of of the material. There are many options. I mentioned co-extracting products. I mentioned selecting the seedlings. I mentioned improving the extraction yield, etc., etc. But obviously, you're always limited by something, your weakest link. And the weakest link here, I feel, is the intrinsic amount of whatever you want to extract from the seaweed. If you want to extract proteins and your seaweed has 5%, well, apart from selecting the one that has 5.1, maybe 5.2, there's not much else you can do. How about genetic modification? I know there's a lot of talks around it. A lot of the seaweeds are consumed directly as food. There's been bans on genetic modification because it's destined to the food industry. But what if we were talking about seaweeds that are simply produced for extracting either biostimulants or polysaccharides, I'm thinking, for bioplastics? Is that something that you would worry about personally? Like, what are your opinions on it? Supposing, obviously, the modified species would not be invasive, etc., or have any nefarious effects. And do you think money will go into research in that area?
I think it would depend on how large the gain is, right? I mean, if you can go to 10% protein from 5, then I would imagine that there would be money going that direction. I think one of the issues with GMO quite often is that it's essentially a superior species to what was there before. So the chances of it becoming invasive or taken over, and also I think the sort of public vision towards these products, I do think that's something that could hinder such products.
So you think the investment would come from whoever needs it?
Yeah, I think if, for example, right now I feel we're sort of at the beginning, particularly in Europe, in the beginning of where we can go seaweed sector, right? So I think the first steps would be, okay, let's try to scale up. Let's see if we can make this commercially viable. And then once you start hitting that wall, then I think you can go towards the next avenue, which could be, hey, look, do we want to genetically amplify these products? But I think right now there's still a lot to gain in the current practices.
Thank you, Jesper, and thank you, Thibaut. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. I'm very sorry to jump in here, but we want to give you the opportunity to still be at another session that the Ocean Health team is offering. So Maxime will share the links to the new and second round of Zoom sessions, focusing on another room, so coral or seaweed. So please join in on the next session that you would like to join in. If you still want to be in touch, please reach out via our LinkedIn. Can you share the link? Here are the links that you can choose. Please feel free to reach out through our LinkedIn, reach out with the Ocean Health team. The agenda for this brief 20 minutes that we still have is that we will first give an introduction of ourselves. We will talk about the values of seaweed. We will talk about the value generation and how Van Oord and Ocean Health jumps in here. We will have some scoping questions and move on to a discussion question. So, sorry?
I didn't see your slides.
Can everyone see my slides or not?
Yeah, I can see them.
Yes, we can.
We can now.
Great, perfect. So Maxime, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Fien. Hi, everyone. I'm Maxime Blomberg. I joined Van Oord last year as an environmental engineer. My background lies in ecology and policy. And for Van Oord, I was involved in a feasibility study for an offshore seaweed farm in the Dutch North Sea.
Thank you very much, Maxime. Moving on to Jesper, if you would like to introduce yourself to the room.
Yeah, sure thing. So good afternoon. My name is Jesper Elzinga. I'm the coordinator of the Environmental Engineering Department at Van Oord. I have a background in aquatic ecology. I have several years of experience in setting up coral projects with Van Oord around the globe, as well as some seagrass projects, and very excited to see what this new product line of seaweed will bring us.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jesper. My name is Fien van der Zwan. I'm a business analyst within the Ocean Health team, which obviously I think that has become clear. It's very new within Van Oord. My focus is on kind of the creation of business models related to the revenue streams related to ocean health. My focus has been on seaweed. It's been a very exciting opportunity. There's a lot going on here. And us three together, we will be hosting this product room focusing on seaweed for all of you. So we decided to really look at the value of seaweed and what it brings. So we have given an extensive, but definitely not an exhaustive list of the values of seaweed, which I really think what really becomes clear from this list is the versatility of seaweed. I mean, we are talking about coastal protection that it brings tourism, it's a form of carbon sequestration and CO2 credits, but seaweed is also used for biostimulants and food. So this list, which is not even a quarter of what it can bring, already shows that the massive value of seaweed and of that seaweed has. So where does Ocean Health come in and where does Van Oord come in? We believe that we definitely take part in the value generation of seaweed as we participate in the restoration of seaweed, the cultivation of seaweed, the wild harvesting of seaweed, and also the collection of excessive seaweed. And these four things really contribute to the general value that seaweed can bring. If you just think of the collection of excessive seaweed and then the excessive seaweed that can be used for biostimulants, that is a great contribution that it has to each other. So that is really where our role comes in. But we would also like to focus on you and we would like to get to know the room. So Maxime will share a poll, which is the focus region of your work. And with that, I really mean as in, if you are in the seaweed industry, what area are you focused on? Are you focused on seaweed in the North Sea or the Atlantic, or where are you? You can also fill it in as where are you located right now? We would just like to get a feel of where are you working or where are you located?
3 responses for other.
Got some others, great. And if you would like to shout out if you filled in other, where you're from, we would be happy to hear from you.
Margot says worldwide.
Worldwide, that's a very good one.
Yeah, still 5 for other.
Okay. Anyone that filled out other would like to share where they're from?
Focusing on Namibia.
Focusing on Namibia. And that's also where you are located right now, or you're located somewhere else?
No, located in the Netherlands.
Okay, wonderful. Great to hear. So if anybody else would like to take the floor and share where their focus is. If not, we will be moving on to the next question, which really helps us to get to know the room. We would like to know kind of in what area are you from? So we asked the question, I am a, and then are you a student? Are you working for an NGO? Are you working in the startup industry? Once again, Maxime will share the poll for this. But I highly recommend just shouting out where you are from or what you are doing, because we would really love to get the conversation started here. Briefly introduce yourselves.
Corporates?
4 people from the corporate industry. Would you like to take the floor and introduce yourself?
I also see one spot.
Yeah, so I filled in corporate, but I was a bit in doubt whether to fill in researcher or to fill in corporate. So I feel within our departments we sort of try and walk the fine line there.
Mm-hmm. First down role.
Yeah, thanks, Jesper. Of course, I mean, I understand that there can be a a fine line to choose where you're from. But if nobody would like to give an introduction of yourselves, then we will be moving on to the discussion question.
This ID into what I was doing before.
I cannot hear you very well. I don't know if you could maybe get a bit closer to the mic. Okay.
Maybe something is wrong.
Okay, maybe something went wrong. Then we will be moving on to the discussion question. So we know that we have some people from the corporate side in here, and we would, in the startup side, we would like to know, what do you feel is needed to help accelerate and grow the seaweed industry? So we have just shared with you the values of seaweed. As you can see, they're very extensive. And yeah, we would like to hear from you. What do you think is necessary to really get this industry growing?
I think we have an answer from Samantha, right? We can get into.
Yeah, for some reason I cannot see my chat function. So Samantha, if you would like to unmute yourself and discuss, you're more than welcome to do so.
I think to scale up the industry, you have to create first the market. So you have to be able to sell the products, which then makes your company profitable. There are other barriers to entry which are related to finance, and so to be able to scale up. And you also have licensing areas. The ocean is not like land. You can't just buy a piece of it. You need to get permission to be able to farm it. So that is, licensing can be a big problem for many areas. You know, in the UK, it could take you three to 10 years to get a license. And then the last one is awareness, you know, try to get people to understand that seaweed is not fin fish, and it has very different benefits to other types of aquaculture. So awareness, which leads to policy makers awareness as well, leads to then licensing to allow to be able to even start farming the ocean sustainably.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
points.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's definitely true. I think what's interesting about what you mentioned here is that really sell it to the market. This is actually one thing that came out in the first breakout session as well, is that the market is still not very focused on the value of seaweed. For instance, the fact that it can be used as a fertilizer is not very well known yet. And how do you feel that this should really be? What can help to really identify the market, but more so making seaweed an actual player in that market? How do you think, yeah, or anybody else, feel free to step in. What do you think is necessary for that?
I'm happy to answer, but if somebody else wants to speak,
It's
I think it's to do with scaling and the pricing of the product, and it is a chicken and egg. If you can scale it and bring down if you can scale, then you can do mechanically harvesting, etc. You can bring down the price of the product, and create a large enough supply of consistent quality, and then you can create a proper market of it. Because if it's only very small scale, then there's never enough product that can be sold onto the market. So you can't really create a sector as a whole. So the whole sector has to scale up. Only 2% of seaweed cultivation is happening in the West. So we have a lot of catching up to do with Asia.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing. I heard that someone else raised his hand.
These Dammers.
Ties?
Yeah, hi. I'm Ties Dammers from Holland. Normally I'm more into plastic, but I like the idea of algae and seaweed. I like the idea I'm inspired by the idea to combine wind parks and growing the seaweed industry. It would be a good idea if all wind parks are claimed to grow the seaweed industry because it isn't very suitable for other activities. So there's a lot of space within wind parks to grow seaweed. And an inspiring thing of seaweed was the Japanese version of seaweed, which is food for cows, and it reduces methane within cows by a trip by 4. This an interesting idea, and I was wondering what you think about it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
As Van Oort, we were part of a consortium that looked into the feasibility of indeed farming within an offshore wind farm, not necessarily with the idea of food for cattle, but indeed that's a good point. And in that project, some bottlenecks were actually the local circumstances with the big waves, the large currents, and then also influencing the kind of species you could cultivate, because the seaweed has to have a sort of food to hold on to the structure. So some seaweed species that are really nice for to make a product of are not feasible for such a structure, and that already limits. And then you have also the legislation in place that limits the choice of species even further, because you have like non-native and then native, and then sometimes it gets quite vague because species are found on shore quite often, but then are still not native, so then you cannot cultivate it, and then the species you could cultivate are not always that profitable to bring on the market, so that's then again a bottleneck. But indeed, it is a really interesting idea, of course, because the space at sea, even though people think there's a lot of space, it decreases quite fast with the wind farms and also other uses like fishery and natura zones. So it's indeed a really, really interesting idea, which Van Oort is also interested in, as we're also players in the offshore wind, of course. So.
I think the Dutch government's really pushing for that to incorporate the seaweed sector into the offshore wind parks.
Yeah.
And like I said, Maxime, we have looked at the feasibility. I think at this stage you are quite limited in the species you can work with in Dutch waters. And also at this stage, I think there's still a lot of progress to be made in terms of the technology of how can we actually grow this most efficiently. How could the market then work? But I think, like what we see with a lot of things, I think it's a good idea to start small and then actually see, hey, look, can we upscale this step by step?
Thank you.
Was massive.
Yeah, Bas?
Yeah, so hi. Just here out of personal interest, actually. I saw the announcement on LinkedIn, but I like the previous comments and also the comment before about licensing, because I think from my own personal experience in my own projects, I need it's always good to have the government on board, and also you can solve many problems in one go, right? If you can solve a licensing issue, you can also solve the kind of issue of scalability if you actually make, for example, seaweed farming obligatory for every new wind farm, etc. So it could actually be a solution to a whole bunch of problems in one go. Easier said than done, I realize that, but from my experience in many sustainability projects, for example, you do need some kind of regulatory drive to really get things going, right? Whether it's offshore wind or carbon compensation, etc., right? To really achieve scalability very quickly, having a regulatory push helps a lot. And yeah, this might be the same then if you could, do combinations of seaweed and wind farming and etc. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would certainly be an interesting step to make it obliged. We do see that for nature inclusive design on scale protections, for example, in the offshore wind parks. Whereas now the seaweed sector is very much encouraged, but it's not obliged. So, I mean, taking it one step further could help the industry.
True, and clearly, like you pointed out, a bunch of you, right? The devil is in the detail, right? Then what kind of species can you grow, and so it's easier said than done. But it probably is a first step to kind of combine these things in, for example, a tender for an offshore wind farm or the likes. So yeah, anyway, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing that. Would anybody else, I think we have about 5 more minutes before we return to the main session. Would anybody else like to share their input on what you think is necessary to really accelerate the seaweed industry? Or how does your business come into play there, or your idea? I mean, that can also definitely be an opportunity to share your input in this.
Maybe I can share a little bit on my background. I'm Rolf Schuurman from Larive International. We're a Dutch-based business development consultancy. We actually help a lot of European companies go into emerging markets in Asia and Africa. And one of the themes that we are working on is actually the transition into alternative proteins, so food. And that's of course where seaweed might make a promising have a promising input there. And that's also when I listen to the discussion and the research you've done so far is if I understand correctly, most of the research is now done on whether it's technically feasible. Can we do it, and what should we do, and what species, and that kind of things. But my question was also, is there a view on if there are any off-takers, either like corporates who would want to buy the seaweed or their products and have alternative protein products to the consumers, and what kind of markets then the seaweed in the end in end products would kind of have to go to. Is there any view on that, or do you know whether there are those connections at this stage?
So if I understand your question correctly, it's kind of, so what are the markets that
yeah, so yeah, that is of course the end question. But my question actually is, do you have a view on that? Has that been part of what you've been doing so far, or is it more on the technical part? Can we either do it within wind farms, and how should we do that? So that's a bit my question. Where's Van Oord focusing on?
Yeah, I see. Thanks. So I think for my personal view there, I think the offshore wind is very focused on integrating it in their projects. I think for us as Ocean Health, we're very focused at looking at the end product more of it. So where's the demand for seaweed? In which areas is this? In which businesses are this? And in that sense, within Van Oord, there's like an overlap between what Ocean Health is doing, as in where can it be used for, and what offshore wind is doing, as in can and how can we implement this in our projects. My personal view is that I think there's a lot of potential in like the food industry of seaweed, because I think it's also the main industry that is like, it's closest to what we know. I mean, everyone already knows of the eating of seaweed, while using it in fertilizers is less so. Having said that, I think every industry in which it can be used, going from fertilizers to vegan leather, I think if the scalability is there, which really allows for the market price to be lessened, I think it's going to be a business that is really going to take off really in the next couple of years, if it just becomes like normalized in that sense. But it hasn't necessarily been normalized yet. However, I do think that is where it will be going if the upscaling happens. But you need upscaling for normalization, is my personal view on that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, pretty much actually, and Thanks very much for your question, for your answer. And I think also there is quite some upscaling in the protein shift part. So this could also be a demand pulled shift towards the seaweed production, because if larger companies and corporations like Unilever or those kind of organizations are demanding more of proteins coming from, for example, seaweed, then it becomes more profitable to do it as well. So I think there is also a tandem to be made between that demand and the production side. So
if I may,
for my inputs for this conversation.
Yeah, if I may add to this, for the feasibility study, one of our partners, already signed some letters of intent for off-taking products, and those were also cosmetic companies. But also one of the bottlenecks you get into is like when you produce it somewhere, you have to have a sort of landing facility to keep it fresh and of good quality. But in order for it to construct a landing facility, you first have to have a farm. So it's again a sort of chicken and egg story, which forms then another bottleneck. But there is quite some interest also from cosmetic industry.
Yeah, for sure. On that note, I have just shared the link to the Ocean Health team in the chat. So if you, Roelof, if you would like to continue this discussion, please feel free to send us a message there, and I'll be happy to continue our chat there. I think we have finished this breakout session. So if you would like to return to the main room, I think the link will be shared right now back to the main room, and we will gather back there to round up the event and listen to the final input that will be given.
Cool. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you.
I will send the link to the main room right now. You give me 1 second.
Oh, I found it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Maxime will send it. Perfect. So it is the top link, the main stage, and we will see you all there. Thank you all very much for your input.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Bye.